Yeah, we apologise for the delay and apologise for any technical difficulties that might have arisen and caused some frustration on your end. But we are in a COVID world where technology is sometimes painful, but we've done our best. And yeah, my name's Andrew. Most people know me as AJ, and I'm in a really privileged position to be the team leader of community wellbeing here at the Mornington Peninsula Shire, and I'm currently working from an office in Rosebud. So technology enables us to do this. I'm sure we've got people tuning in from everywhere, potentially across the peninsula, the state, and even across the world. Who knows? So yeah, tonight we are launching the Mornington Peninsula Communities Creating Change project. And this is the first session of Unpacking the Man Box. So we've got some fantastic guest speakers here tonight for one of those, and just getting you guys to participate in the conversation as well. So a bit of housekeeping. You'll see down the bottom of your screen there is a Q&A function. If you feel the need to ask a question, you can do that. There'll be lots of things shared throughout this hour and a half, and there might be things front of mind that you want to get off your chest or you might want to ask. So don't feel like you need to hold on to that until the very end. Feel free to plant that into the chat. We have a friendly group of people behind the scenes that we're moderating that chat, consolidating some of the themes, and then we'll have a Q&A once Paul and Elise have done their presentation. And yeah, we'll ensure that all questions are answered, and yeah, we encourage you to contribute as we play out. So before we begin and get into all the good stuff that we're here for tonight, I'd like to introduce our amazing man, Councillor Despy O'Connor, who will introduce, I guess, the man box and why we're here, and also do an acknowledgement of country. So Despy, if you are there, I will hand it over to you.
I'm here. Thanks, AJ. I hope everybody can hear me. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And to start, I'd like to welcome everyone to this potentially life-changing webinar. And I thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I think you're going to get a lot out of this one. I'd also like to acknowledge my fellow councillors who are online tonight. So Councillor Chelley, Councillor Holland, Councillor Marr and Councillor Race. And I'd also like to acknowledge Liz Murphy, who's from Vic Health, who's in the room tonight or online tonight somewhere. Thanks, Liz, for tuning in. And thank you too to Family Life and Jesuit Social Services, the Men's Project, and my officers at Mornington Peninsula Shire for making this happen. Thank you. And thanks, Josh, but AJ will introduce you later. In the language of the traditional owners of this area, Wominjeka, welcome. I'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the elders, families and ancestors of the Bunurong Bunwurrung people who have been the custodians of this land for many thousands of years. I acknowledge that the land on which we meet is the place of age-old ceremonies, celebrations, initiation and renewal, and that the Bunurong Bunwurrung people's living culture continues to have a unique role in the life of this region. And I'd also like to acknowledge any other Indigenous language groups where you're meeting today, which is hard to know who they are because you're probably from all over the place. I'm delighted to be part of this webinar today. With all that's been happening in recent weeks, this topic is more important than ever. A lot of what we're seeing in the news at the moment is behaviour resulting from outdated ideas about gender. Old ideas about masculinity serve no one, male or female, and we sometimes forget how damaging these traditional views are for all of us. I know that many boys and men still feel pressure to live up to that traditional masculine stereotype, and that this can have a massive impact on their health and well-being, particularly mental health. Pressure to live up to this old, outdated gender roles comes with a high price. It can force men to hide their true selves, stop them from connecting emotionally with others, and lead to depression and anxiety. As a council, we have a responsibility to look after the health and well-being of our whole community. In fact, it's part of our mandate from the state government, and that includes emotional and psychological health, which is the focus of this webinar tonight. I'm proud to be part of this council, a council that was among the first in the state to adopt a gender equality strategy. And one of the actions under that plan is challenging gender stereotypes. Another is strengthening positive, equal, respectful relationships. Gender equality is important because it will set us all free, every single one of us, free from restrictive ideas of what a man or a woman should be. We want all our young boys in our community to have the freedom to develop their own unique personalities and interests without the pressures of this outdated idea of masculinity. As human beings, our health and well-being is inextricably linked to the culture that we live in. And if we want our boys to live a happy and fulfilled life, they need role models who will show them how to break free from the tired old masculine stereotype. I hope many of you here today will become the role models for change that we all need. We need to show our boys that being a good man is simply about being a good person. It's that simple. And if we can change even some of those outdated ideas of how to be a real man, the men and boys in our community will be happier and healthier. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Despy. I'm sure that if we had a sound coming through from our audience, there'd be claps, and you use the word proud. And for me, as a council officer, I'm incredibly proud to be able to work in an organisation that has this focus, and I can definitely see the passion and the commitment that you have and the other councillors to this really important cause. And so, yeah, I just really want to acknowledge and thank you for being here this evening. I think it takes really good leadership as well to make change, and we definitely have that at our organisation. So thank you to you, Despy. So before we start the workshop, I'll give just a quick overview of the project. So as Despy said, the Shire is committed to advancing gender equality. And as she said, we're proud that the gender equality strategy was adopted, and we'll work towards that over the next 10 years. The Shire was one of only 2 councils in Victoria that received Vic Healthy Masculinities funding to deliver the Mornington Peninsula Communities Creating Change project in partnership with Family Life. The project aims to engage and empower men, boys, and the broader community across the peninsula to help raise awareness of how outdated rules of manhood hold men back from living happy, healthy lives. To help achieve this, the Shire is working with the Men's Project, Jesuit Social Services, to deliver a series of engagement opportunities throughout 2021. Starting tonight with the launch event of Unpacking the Man Box. So we're super excited. There's been so much work that's gone on behind the scenes, and yeah, tonight we're kicking it off, which is super exciting. So before we begin, what we're going to be doing is a live poll that will come up on your screen, and this is going to assist us in the way of ensuring that the message is getting through, and kind of trying to get an understanding as to where our community is at. So shortly, something will come up on your screen, which hopefully you can all see now. And we ask you to participate. So the question is, my awareness of the impact of gender stereotypes on boys and men and the people they live and work with is, and then you tick where you feel you sit. So if you can all participate in that now, that would be fantastic. I think we estimated that it should take no more than 30 seconds for that to be done. So I'm having a good guess and thinking that we're all completed. So thank you for doing that for us, and we'll revisit that at the end of the presentation too. So let's get tonight's session underway. It is my absolute privilege to introduce our amazing facilitators. Half of you have probably already seen them from our banter and chat at the start before we began, but we have Paul and we have Elise from Jesuit Social Services, who are here to talk about the Men's Project. So I'll zip my mouth and I'll be quiet, and I'll hand it over to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, AJ, and thank you, Councillor Despy. That was a wonderful introduction. It's exactly where we're heading, and what a wonderful base to work from. My name is Paul. I've worked in the school sector for 16 years, mainly boys education, and then I worked in the community sector as well, teaching young people who had dropped out of school, and they taught me so much. And so much of what I'll share with you tonight has been my experience, or our experience, working with young men. The Jesuit Social Services have been working with young men and older men as well for the past 43 years, and that's what's shaping a lot of our work. I'm going to ask, we're going to share a PowerPoint slide now, and we'll go in and out of the PowerPoint slide, and I hope you enjoy tonight. we're going to set up and what I'll call top and tail with a bit of a story that I have for you. I want you to imagine a local boy. Let's say that he's 18 years of age. He's dropped out of school, or he actually dropped out when he was 16. He's got a few mental health issues. At this stage, they're largely undiagnosed. At times, he self-medicates with either alcohol, or if he gets the opportunity, various recreational drugs, he'll access them as well. There is violence in his world, whether it be with around his mates, or even around the language that him and his mates talk about with the women in their world. He's generally, we would say he's generally unhappy, and he's disengaged really from the community. He hangs out with local youth, and the community kind of look at him and his mates as the bad kids and troublemakers. And police have now met with him, and he's involved in discussions with them, and they've actually referred him to a local community centre who are doing school for kids now in a community setting. Okay, you got that person in your head. I want to go back let's go back 18 years in time, and at the local hospital, and he's been born, and you go into the room where all the little baby boys are all lined up, all the babies are, but there's a couple of boys together, and he's one of them. And my question for you is, can you pick him? Can you pick him as for a better term, the disengaged young boy compared to the other boys? Can you work out which one's which? And that's going to set the scene, because I want us to focus on along the journey of this young boy from 0 to 18, from early life, early childhood, primary, secondary, sporting clubs. What did he learn? What opportunities did he have? Where did he get his messaging from? And just to kind of set it up, when I'm normally doing this in a crowd that's live, I'll ask the questions, and some people say, well, he may have had a very difficult start in life, or his parents may have had their own issues, and there may have been some trauma. He therefore, in early years, he may have missed out on some of his early learning. He went to school and maybe school wasn't working for him. In fact, sometimes at school, might be focusing on the things at home weren't great. And on his journey to high school, he probably hung out with some kids, and they had similar issues, and they tended to be the tougher kids. Eventually, the school probably had enough of him and said, look, it might be time. And that's back to the start of the story. So I want to think about that. And at the end of this session, we're going to revisit this young man. Let's give him a name. Let's call him Marcus so we can reference him. And that's just how I want to set the scene, if you like. I'll now go to the next slide, and we've been talking a bit about this man box thing. So I'd like to set the scene by explaining to you, what is this man box? So I'll get you to do something. Again, if this is live, we'll get your feedback, but just do it in your head. Imagine I said to you, just walking outside your front window of your house now, you see a man walk past, and another member of the family said, oh my God, he looks like a real man, inverted commas, real man. In your own mind, what words would our community use to describe a real man? Just have a think about that. If you're going to describe a real man, he's this, he's this, he's this. And for the purposes of this activity, I now want you to imagine that another man walks past, and another member of your family looks out the window and says, oh, that's what I'd call that man. He's not a real man. He's kind of like the antithesis of a real man. And so what do we call him? He's this, I just want to think of the words that are in your head. Okay, so now we'll go to the next slide, and that was a bit of a setup. So I wonder if you got some of these words, because this is what we have been doing. I've done this for the last 10 years in schools, predominantly in sporting clubs. These are what I hear. And just to put in context, I ran a session yesterday for grade 5 and 6 kids, and they got, except for the word player, they got all of those words when I did exactly the same thing with you. And then I said, so what are the words if you don't measure up? And let's see what they are. did these words match with what you had? So we'll just click through these words. Girl. So you don't measure up, so you must be gay, you're a pussy, homo, weak, bitch, dickhead, and fag. I hate to say it, these are the lightweight words. These are the lighter words. And about now, if I was to progress this with a senior group of kids, we'd ask them, you know, is this what happens in your world? And they'll usually say, oh yeah, but we have even stronger words than that. And I'm sure you've heard them. So the man box works like this. And I'll tell you personally here, I've well and truly been in the man box for particularly the first probably 35 years of my life, where I don't necessarily, it's not necessarily a great place to be, but it's where you feel like you belong. And I don't know how I got to understand this because no one ever taught it to me, but I know it's the place to be because if you're not in it, I've seen what's happened to the guys who kind of don't measure up. And those are the words they get called. And in fact, I'm sure I've been called those in my life. And when I do, I kind of, let's give a word, I man up. How about that? And go back to being, you know, what I think society needs me to be. I can personalize this one. I suffered depression really badly, ended up in hospital with depression. And the day before, literally, I was still at work and my friends they actually had no idea. And if they asked me how I was, I'd say, yeah, I'm fine. That was because I thought I couldn't let my guard down. I couldn't drop this thing. So this is the man box. And the language particularly, the reason we've shown you the language is that it's the language polices this very closely. So I'll ask, we'll move to the next slide now. And I'm going to ask my colleague Elise to introduce herself, and we're going to pause that video right there. Thank you. And Elise will introduce herself and talk to us about the research we've done. Thanks, Elise.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share a personal story before presenting some information about our Manbox research. So I have a 6-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. And when my son was born, I was gifted a pink blanket. I remember at the time wondering why my friend had given me a pink blanket when I'd had a boy. So I put it in the cupboard and it didn't come back out until I had my daughter. Then last year, during lockdown, my mum bought my son some pajamas online. And when they arrived, there was a pink pair in the bag. Again, I thought, why did my mum buy pink? But by this time, or at this time, I'd been working for the Men's Project for about a year, and I caught myself. I noticed that if I was to say, pink's for girls and I'm sending them back to the shop, that I'd be sending a message to my kids that certain things are for boys and certain things are for girls. So I put the pajamas in my son's drawer, and that night he got them out and he put them on and he did not mention the colour. My daughter did. She said that she thought they looked like they were for girls. But my son continues to wear those pajamas, and it seems like I'm the one that's a little bit uncomfortable about it. I could say that it's just my preference to see him in grey or green or blue, but I think it's actually what I've been taught or how I've been conditioned, what I've been conditioned to prefer. This might seem like a really small example, but it seems that it's the small things, the things that we don't notice or that don't seem to matter, that do actually make up a larger story. So I encourage you to notice the messages that young people receive about what it is to be a boy, a man, a girl, or a woman, and to critically question why this is and the influence that it's having. How much of what we believe people should wear, play with, act, and do is socially constructed. And if these constraints were lifted, could people be more free? A few years ago, the Men's Project undertook the Man Box research, which asked men what messages they receive from society about what it means to be a real man. The survey also asked whether they agree with those messages and some wellbeing questions. I'm just going to play a video now that summarises that research. And Manvi, if you wouldn't mind, we'll just hope that the sound works. Thanks so much.
The Men's Project asked 1,000 Australian men aged 18 to 30 about the pressures to be a real man. The pressure to be tough, to be the breadwinner, to always be in control and to have many sexual partners. It's these rules that make up the Man Box, and there are more people in there than you might think. When asked about these rules, 2/3 of those surveyed said they were taught a real man behaves a certain way. 47% believe they should act strong, even when scared or nervous. 1/3 believe men should be the primary provider for their families. And 37% believe they should know their partner's whereabouts at all times. Adhering to these rigid norms and stereotypes that make up the Man Box can be unhealthy and harmful. Young men inside the Man Box are those who more strongly believe in the Man Box rules. Compared to young men who are outside of the Man Box, these young men report poorer mental health and have a variety of behavioural issues that are harmful for them and others, particularly women. For example, 44% of those inside the Man Box reported suicidal thoughts in the previous 2 weeks, compared to 22% of young men outside the Man Box. 47% perpetrated physical violence in the past month, compared to 7%. 46% made sexual comments to a woman or girl they didn't know, compared to 7%. 31% get drunk once a month or more, compared to 22%. And finally, 38% have been in a car accident in the past year, compared to 11% of those outside the Man Box. Improving the health and well-being of our boys and men requires action across our entire community, but it starts with each of us thinking about the expectations, attitudes and behaviours that we communicate to our sons, brothers, mates and partners. Let's all break free from the Man Box and give boys and men the freedom to be the person they want to be.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen and show. Wait a sec. No, give me a sec. Just to open it in a different way.
While Elise is doing that, I wonder, normally in a session again, where if it was face-to-face, we would ask people, what stood out most for you? What was in that really you noticed? So while you're at home, have a think about that, because that might be something you might want to ask a question about later on.
Thanks, Paul. So just to recap on some of what was in that video, the Man Box rules you can see here down the centre. And on one side, we've got the percentages of participant respondents who agree or strongly agree that society tells them these messages. And on the other side, the percentage who agree with the rules. So in their opinion, they believe the same thing. So 69% said society tells them that guys should act strong even when they feel scared or nervous. And 47% agreed with that rule. 54% said that, for example, men should figure out their personal problems on their own without asking others for help. And 27% agreed. 35% said that men should use violence to get respect if necessary. And 20% agreed. And although 20% might seem like a low number, that's 2 out of every 10 of the men who aged between 18 and 30 who took part in the survey agree with that. 56% agree or said that society says that a real man would never say no to sex, and 24% agree. 56% said that men should be the ones to bring money home to provide for their families, not women, and 35% agreed. Nearly 50% said a guy who spends a lot of time on his looks isn't very manly, and 32% agreed. And again, almost 50% said that society as a whole tells me that a gay guy is not a real man, and almost 30% agreed. As the video mentioned, this is having some real impacts. And we can see on this slide that the men who agree with the man box rules, the ones there that say that are inside the man box, were more likely than those outside the man box, so those that didn't agree necessarily with the message that society gives them, were more likely to report having had recent thoughts of suicide, having had perpetrated bullying and sexual harassment, having been involved in traffic accidents and binge drinking. So it's the rigid adherence to the stereotypical masculine norms that's leading to the poor outcomes, to some really poor outcomes for men, as well as the people in their lives. So Paul, I think I'll pass back to you now to talk about what the alternative could look like.
Thank you, Elise. And I was just reflecting it before I go on that I think it was my error. I should have given a warning because there may be some people at home. We've brought up issues of having suicidal thoughts in the last 2 weeks and sexual harassment. And I've done a lot of work in the space of men's violence against women and men's violence against men. And so I just wanted to recognise that there is a 1-800-RESPECT number that you can call. And if something does trigger you during this, we do understand that and we encourage you to seek some support in that. And we'll speak towards that again at the end. But I apologise for not putting that in there. I also wanted to mention that I should have mentioned at the start too. We reference binary just because it makes the discussion easier, but we understand that there's a spectrum of gender, and as Elise said, the construct of gender exists, and there are many people identified differently to what we have as what we call a man and a woman, and we want to recognise that is also part of how our community is moving positively towards embracing that, and part of our education as well. So to move to this, I've done a lot of work with men in this space, and they tell me sometimes the reason that they don't come into this space is that they feel like they might be perceived as a victim, or a perpetrator, or they may be, inverted commas, have the finger wagged at them as being a bad person, and what if I'm not that guy, and those sorts of things. So what we've done is, and from our success that we've had, is we want to speak around what we're calling a strength-based approach or a growth mindset, which means let's go towards talking about healthier forms of masculinity. The naming itself was important. because sometimes I might feel like you're telling me that I'm not healthy, and we don't want to say that to men. So healthier is really important, how we phrase this. And masculinities, again, I would say that if there's 89 participants, let's imagine that they're all men for argument's sake. I would argue that really, if we all let our guards down, there's actually 89 different ways of expressing our masculinities, and all of them are wonderful, as long as we're exhibiting the healthier or the best parts of ourselves. So we very much feel that this is the way to move, and our experience has been that this is men will walk into the room when they are seen as someone who can contribute to the best part of themselves and those around them, and model those behaviours. So that's what we're working towards now. And then we're going to require a fair bit of time for education, because we've been thinking and feeling this way for a long, long time. And so it's going to take some time for people to get the understanding. And to be honest, and I'm throw myself under the bus here, I'm still making a lot of mistakes myself. I'll give you an example. The word guys is a really interesting one, and I find myself using it all the time when I'm speaking to boys and girls. And I tested this yesterday. I had a group of boys and girls, I said grade 5 and 6s, and I asked them to stand up, and I said, okay, could all the guys sit down, please? And all the girls kept standing. And I realised, yes, we still haven't got to a place where that is actually a universal word. So when I say guys, that means I'm actually giving more preference to the men than I am to the young women. So this whole idea of healthier masculinity, the big question then is, what is it? What does it look like? And I delivered a session at an all-boys school on this, and I was trying to extract that out of them. We got about 5 or 6 words up on the whiteboard, and then one of my colleagues, she had a great idea, and I want to show it to you now. So on the next slide, we ran this activity, and I want you to try it out at home. Actually, if you have a pen and paper, write this down. If not, just do it in your own mind. I'd love to, and maybe in the question times, people might want to share it. So this is what she did. Imagine a man that you really admire. You really have a lot of time for this person, and you just think that they're a really quality person, and you admire the traits that they bring to how they work with people and what they model to others. And then someone says, "Oh, you get along really well with that gentleman, or boy or man, at any age, doesn't matter. It's his birthday. Would you mind giving the speech?" And you think, "Oh, okay." And as part of your planning of the speech, you think, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write down the 3 traits that I most admire in this person. So in your mind, imagine you're going to do this speech, and you've got this person in your head. What are their 3 best qualities? What are the 3 traits that you really admire about this man? And I'll just give you a moment just to think about it and put them in your mind, or write them down. And then I'll tell you how this works when we've been doing this in an online forum. Normally, when we can have a chat function, we can fill the page, and out come things like honesty, good listener, integrity, good bloke. We might get something like that. Then comes respectful, supportive, friendly. And I tell you what, we noticed that we never got all those real man words. Every now and then we might get strong, and then if we pull that out, it's actually strong to the positive, not strong as in controlling. So suddenly we realised, actually, this is aspirational. This is, and we already know the words. We don't have to do a thesis on this. We know them, that they're there. And then we played around with this a bit, and this is a really interesting point around gender equality. And I'll get you to do this now. Think of an amazing woman in your life, a woman that you really admire. And it's exactly the same thing. You've got the birthday speech, and you want to think of their 3 top qualities. Have a go at that. Just think about them and think of the 3 top qualities of this woman you admire. Again, I'm going very binary here, but you'll see where I get to in a minute. Essentially, what we landed on were the words were all the same. The words are effectively what we admire in each other, what we admire in humans. And I love that we landed here, because this is gender equality. This is across the board, regardless of how you identify with your gender. These are the traits we admire. And these are the traits that we'd love to encourage you to show. So now, rather than the growth mindset concept is, rather than telling people what not to do, it's about celebrating their best sides and encouraging them to go to this. And so that's how we've started having discussions with men and women and boys and girls about the kind of attributes of what would healthier masculinities look like. Then I can say and we'll get to this in a minute, when people say, what do I do I want to do something in this space? Well, for starters, think about what you're modeling. And I've said this to a lot of groups of people. When you're at home, you're on. You're modeling to your family. When you walk out the front door, you're on, and the kid next door sees you. He's looking at how you do what you do. And then you go to work, you're on. You're at the sporting club, you're on. You are constantly, whether you like or not, you're a role model. So what is it that you're modeling? And this is the start of what we're going towards tonight, to show that's what we're trying to lead to, that we want to start getting people to think about what kind of influencer they are, and how important they are as an influencer, and how if they go out of their way to think about, right, I'm about to coach this basketball team, there's more to it than the game. I'm going to model this positive masculinity, or this healthier masculinities. So that's the healthy masculinity part. And about now, it's a wonderful time to be able to introduce Josh Kennedy, and we really appreciate that you've given up your time, Josh. For those who may not follow Australian football, Josh plays football for the Sydney Swans. He's been a successful footballer as a captain, and he's won a premiership. He's played over 250 games. Josh is also, very importantly, a partner and a father with young children, and he also happens to be our ambassador for the Men's Project. So for the next 10 minutes, Josh and I are just going to have a conversation around healthier masculinities based on a few little questions that I'm going to ask Josh, which I hope that's okay with you, Josh. So welcome, Josh. It's great to have you here. Josh, I was just interested, you, before I started working in Jesuit Social Services, obviously someone approached you to be our ambassador. What was it that you thought, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that? Would you mind explaining that?
Yeah, no worries. And hello, everyone. Thanks very much for having me. I've really enjoyed the, can you hear me okay, first of all?
Good.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the chat so far. And I think, like you, Paul, I'm constantly learning as well in this space, which is great. But if I take my mind back to when I sat down with the Jesuit Social Services, and they were talking about, it wasn't necessarily the man box then, but what they were rolling out was almost like a mentoring program for young men in difficult situations or have come into hardship. And if I reflect on my life, if you talk about the kid from being born to 18 and beyond, I've been extremely fortunate to have an amazing amount of great role models and mentors and support, and every one of those people have had an impact. I mean, if I started to name all the people that had some sort of impact on me along the way, I'd be here all night, and I'm so grateful for that, and understanding that if I could have any positive impact on anyone that might be struggling, understanding that, as I think I've spoken to you, Paul, before, that I'm aware that I've been afforded a lot of privileges in life, and I'm aware of that, and consider myself very lucky. But nonetheless, I've also been taught a lot of great lessons that have got me to where I am. And if I could help pass those on to young kids and tell stories and help them anyway, that'd be great. So that was the reason for me getting on board back then.
Thank you so much, Josh. I think you can help us with my next question. I think particularly if I was a young boy, I'd be kind of questioning someone like yourself, Josh. I see you out in the footy field and to play AFL sport, you know, we hear a lot of words thrown around like courageous and tough and strong. And so on the sporting field, you've got to have that, or apparently you have to have that mentality. And then how do you also hold having a healthy, masculinities and being a great role model and a father and a partner? They seem like almost a little bit like at odds with each other. I'm just wondering if you might be able to help me out with that.
No, I think it just centers around the concept of respect. And when you're playing a sport or any game, if you respect the game and you respect the opposition, you give it your absolute all. And as an outlet as a kid, being able to go out there and run around and chase a footy and you take marks and tackle and do all those things was great. But and you do it in the form of respect for the game and respect for the opposition in the fact that you're doing everything you can to win and give them the best that you can. And I guess then there needs to be an element of switching that off. Sometimes it's not easy in terms of being able to just mentally switch off. But I guess the actions and that mindset of being in control, courageous, not accepting defeat, all those sort of things it's not really true. I sort of, when I think of in control, I think of the duck that's sitting in the water and he's on the surface, he looks quite calm, but underneath his legs are spinning at 100 miles an hour. And certainly, with young players coming in and myself, we all have doubts and we all have, whether it's a bad game or our insecurities. The funny thing is, the more you talk about it, the more you realise that everyone's, as you were saying earlier, everyone's exactly the same.
Thank you, Josh. It's so cool, and I love that you've gone there. And for people listening, we often refer to it the man box. It's the mask you often put on. And I said to you before, with my depression, I had this mask that was telling the world I was all in control and being really stoic. And there's a problem with that because sometimes people see it and they believe it. Yep. When in fact, all of us, as you said, Josh, all of us are as vulnerable as the next person. And wouldn't it be a lovely place where we're trying to go to that's okay to express your vulnerability? And I know a lot of sporting clubs are really leading the way in this space at the moment. So thank you for mentioning that. Josh, you're a partner and a dad. Just wondered in that role, what kind of things you thinking about that you want to model? And maybe we might weave it in with another question as well, because you mentioned before that you've had some great role models yourself. Yep. And I wonder what it was that those people, what was it that you picked up from them? And then maybe as a man now, are you kind of then possibly passing them on as well?
Yeah. I think if I start as in terms of family life and the responsibility of raising two kids, I had a great example in my parents. They certainly weren't perfect, but my mum and dad were great together. But I think from when I think about myself, and when my son was born, you can reflect, and I think about, I can remember quite vividly my childhood and all the things that you see, and you try and interpret and make sense of it all. And there's 90% all the things that Dad did were great, and he's someone that I admire incredibly. But as I said, he wasn't perfect, and there's certain things that I'd try and do a little bit differently. Again, centering around respect for my son and daughter. Number one, I want to be try and be the best example, because no matter what I say, they're going to learn by how I am and what I do. And if I refer that to my childhood, I think about my dad. Just a simple thing like I'd see him have a drink or enjoy a day with his friends, camping around the campfire, but I don't recall him ever being out, losing control, or being drunk or stumbling around, nothing like that. And that's just something that I remember and want to take into my duties as a father. I wish I saw him probably help Mum a little bit around the house. Again, I think that's Mum's an incredibly resilient woman, but something that I'd want to do better. And sorry, my son just came in there. I
thought you were looking to see if your dad was in the background for a minute.
Yeah, I hope he's not listening. You'll have a go at me here, but yeah, and above all, I think what my parents did really well was that they were present. They had work, and when they allowed time to be with us, turn off the phones, they switched off, whether it was not working weekends, whether it was when they were with us, they were with us. And obviously there's exceptions to that, but that was the main thing, and that's something that I want to try and do. The other thing as well is just trying to sorry, my daughter's just come in the room now. One thing with regards to my daughter, when my daughter was born, we had a psychologist working at the football club, and she had two daughters, and she was what's called the breadwinner of her family. So the dad was a little bit more hands-on, and I remember she came in and she was explaining her situation, and she said that what he said to her when they were discussing this was, look, what I want to do is I want to be the example of the sort of man that my daughter deserves, and that's something that I've held true as well. So that's just she may not think that meant a lot to me, but when she said that, I thought, you know what, that's spot on. If I can be an example of this type of man that my daughter deserves, then I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job. But having said that, I'm always learning. As you said, Paul, I'm constantly learning, and certainly not perfect. And I think one thing that my wife's been really good at and been able to teach me is that ability to reflect on a situation, to then be able to say sorry to my kids, to be able to sit down and talk to them like an adult and say, look, mate, or my daughter's probably a little bit young, she's only 2, but my son in this example who's 6, say, look, mate, look, I'm really sorry, because I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have acted that way, or I shouldn't have done that, and that was the wrong thing to do. And that's something that my wife's really good at, and something that I've taken on, but something that as well, when I think about people that have had an impact on me and those sort of things that, I'm not perfect, and I know that my son might look up to me as being so, as I did my dad. But that acknowledgement that, you know what, I do make mistakes, but to be able to admit them and address that with him is something that I think is really important.
Thanks so much, Josh, and I really appreciate you sharing that. And again, you're modelling right now that you're sharing this, and this is the masculinity that we want to celebrate. Josh, obviously at the club that you're at, I imagine there's a lot of young men arrive, and they I spoke just 100% football in their brain, I am imagining. Do you see yourself as a mentor to them, and if so, what is it that you're thinking about beyond how to chase a ball, or do you even think about beyond chasing a ball? And I'd be interested to know whether it be at the club or from a club's perspective or your personal perspective, what is it that you might want to be helping to shape these young men?
Yeah, it's a really important part of what we do and who we are. I've seen it change a lot over the last 15 years since I've been involved in football. It's become a much bigger part of the game, and I think mental health is the number one sort of issue on when we think about the Players Association. It's the number one issue on players' minds. Now, when players come into the Swans, we do an induction process, and we that's in their first or second week of the club, and it's a really special night. I really love it, even as a leader, and we talk them through our values, our behaviours. We explain that the respect for the past, the present, and the future, and on top of that, what we do is then we guide them, and we again, it centers around the fact, like, we all make mistakes, but if we understand the behaviours that we want to accept, and we have the saying that they rattle around is that the standards that you walk past are the standards you accept. So as a leader of the football club, and we encourage everyone, is to if you see something that you don't think is okay, or you don't think meets our standards, then you should say something, and if you do, it should be met with respect and acknowledged by the person receiving that feedback. But on top of all that, Paul, I think the most the biggest thing that we're doing this year and in recent years, and I think it's pretty important for young men and players or sports people or anyone really to understand, especially when it comes around the man box and trying to be tough and deal with your problems yourself and remaining very insular. We have a program that we call the Mental Toughness Program, and I'm sure when you think mental toughness, you're probably thinking that I don't know. You might think that we're trying to do 1,000 push-ups and not giving up, or we're running until we can't run anymore and see who's the most mentally strong. But it's certainly not that. Our mental toughness program is designed to effectively talk about what you were talking before about developing a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. In addition to that, it's about sharing stories of challenges, and it might be past, it might be what you're dealing with right now, players that are having issues, and it might be something severe, or it might be something as simple as I had a bit of an argument with my girlfriend last night, and we're struggling a little bit at the moment. It could be as simple as that. But just the process of being able to talk about it, and I guess share those stories with each other. You see, I've seen teammates break down, crying, because you can just tell that the weight that they're carrying, trying to hold this in, and being able to get it out, and inevitably, as a team, as friends, you talk about the 3 words or whatever you want to describe a good friend. My first one I put down was trust, and that goes both ways, whether I was describing a girl or a boy. And to build trust, you have to be vulnerable. You have to understand that people are going through things, and they've dealt with things, and their stories might be similar to yours. They might be different, but there are similarities, and we're all different, and we're all trying to overcome challenges. And I've always felt better after having expressed myself or my insecurities or why I'm struggling to someone. I've always felt better after that.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Josh. And you've kind of given people a bit of a glimpse into some of the work that we're doing and encouraging people to do, and creating. I love what you've just talked about, creating a safe place for me to be vulnerable, because the man box world doesn't let me do that. I'm hesitating to be vulnerable because someone might turn around and give me one of those words, and I've may have seen other guys be vulnerable and someone smash them for doing it, and so I love that you've mentioned trust, and clearly it's also a leadership thing that you've set up at the club, and this is the sort of thing that I don't know, I'd be interested in what you think. I personally don't think you have to be the Sydney Swans to have to do that. I think this is something that any organisation, if they put their mind to it, could possibly do. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree wholeheartedly, Paul. I think I try and again relate it back to my family, my friends. Trying to be a bit more open and vulnerable, as we said, is something that again I'm working on, and it's making me happier. I overcome challenges a lot quicker, and it's only positive. And I think the more people we can encourage to do that, and it doesn't mean, we call it mental toughness. That's what we call it, because effectively it is, because you share your story and you hear others and you learn how to overcome it, or you might hear the other side of it, or someone else that's been through it, and you have a clearer understanding of what's ahead, and that what you're going through in that point in time might not necessarily be the case in the next day or a week or a year. And for me, it's really, really important.
Thank you so much, Josh. We can't thank you enough for, one, your willingness to be here tonight, but two, to share your vulnerability and to share your story, and we really appreciate your time, and definitely thank you for being our ambassador. And I think sometimes we hear about ambassadors and we don't necessarily hear their stories, whereas it's just lovely to hear your story and be authentic, and we really appreciate that. So thanks so much, Josh. I really appreciate, we all appreciate your time. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Paul. And absolutely, if I can just leave with one message, it would be to be comfortable with being vulnerable and talk to someone. I think if you can find someone that you can trust and confide in, it's so important, and it helps. I think even if you think you're going well and everything's going great, you still do it. Still speak to someone, and it's just gonna tenfold better your life, I think. And that's what we've set up, and it's just been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Josh. And I hope that out of our people listening tonight, that there's some ideas they might want to steal from the Sydney Swans and take to their clubs or their organisation. So thanks so much for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
We're going to go back to our presentation and just pick up the themes that Josh was talking about there, and it actually forms part of what our part of the tonight is, to launch this education, if you like, and sharing our knowledge with the community. And we call that program the Modelling of Respect and Equality program. And tonight is, I suppose, the launching and the introduction and the call for people in the community, yourselves or people you might know that you might recommend, to become part of this program. And so the program is a 2-day workshop in May. It's a commitment. It's a Friday and a Saturday, and we do what we've gone over tonight in an hour or so, we do a much deeper dive of what we've gone over tonight, so that we allow the participants to get a really deep understanding and do some of the stuff that Josh was talking about. Allow some reflection time and getting right into what are some of the drivers of what men do and understanding what healthier masculinities are. Then after we've done that, we talk about how as influencers, and we always refer to wanting to influence influencers, how do they then go and influence the community? How do they, what role could they take and shape? So eventually every person decides to do a small project. They do a action plan, and we support them for 6 months to do this. And for example, I had one of the gentlemen today. It was fascinating, actually, a gentleman and a woman who had been part of one of our recent MORE programs, and what they were able to do today was invite me into a seminar they were running, which was fantastic. And so they themselves have gone on and influenced the next lot of people, if you like, and that's what the whole concept is supposed to be about. So taking action in your community. So in this whole Mornington community, our own people taking action about, and the key part obviously is being an influencer. And then we finish that after we've worked and supported people for 6 months, and we have a WhatsApp group, and we have phone calls. We then take the time to celebrate what they've been able to achieve in their journey. And I can give you a quick reflection. One of the ones that we delivered, the first one we delivered, which was 2 years ago, we still have the WhatsApp group all on its own without us being part of it, still exists, and those people are still connecting. In the city of Yarra Ranges, that they've continued the community of practice to a point that people can now apply to become part of their community of practice. So each organisation or group of people will take it in the direction that they want to. So tonight, this is a bit of a taster, if you like, and we really want to encourage people. We'll have it in at the end of this evening, an expression of interest for anyone, or you might know someone you think, oh my God, I know the person. It doesn't have to be men; it can be men and women, and we're encouraging people from the local community to get involved in this. The next slide.
I might just add to that,
Oh,
Paul.
Lisa, thank you. Please do, if I missed anything.
Just to add that it's open, the workshop in May is open to a maximum of 25 people. So, yeah, that was the only thing to add.
Yeah, really good point. We would love to see it oversubscribed. That would be wonderful. I now want to, so we've put that in there, and I just want to also mention a lot of the things Josh talked about are in the content of that session. We started with the journey of this young man, Marcus, that I suggested was in your community. And we talked about at the ages and stages of his life journey where things happened in his life that influenced his trajectory, where he is now. Now that we've given you a kind of a taste of what we're proposing and shown you the outcomes of the man box, etc., I want you to imagine the same boy back at the hospital, and he's obviously still got the same parents and everything, but imagine if we were able to get this sort of information more widely spread, and at each age and stage, when he went to kindergarten or when he was in the early years, let's say he's at his early years and he's at his creche, and the creche staff understood this. And then he goes to kindergarten and the kindergarten people understand it. His next door neighbour just so happens that he's done one of these programs or read about it. And he decides that he notices this boy's role models aren't necessarily coping themselves, and they're not possibly in a good place. So he decides, I'm going to do something about being a part of this kid's life. Imagine that, and we're doing it already, but imagine yesterday I was in a primary school talking to staff and students, and last night I presented to parents. So imagine what that might do if people decided that they could actually nudge this boy just a little bit, just a fraction. We often talk about what would happen if you had a ship on its journey and you just set it off compass just 5 degrees, and 1,000 kilometers later, it's actually going to land in a very different place. This boy, he then goes to high school, and as it turns out, a teacher takes him under his wing, and he doesn't drop out. They find out what his strengths are. They realise that the fact that he's struggling at the moment isn't that he's a bad kid. It's that he's actually goes home to a place where learning's not really an opportunity. And eventually, this boy is nudged in a slightly different direction. He happens to be good at sport, at the local sporting coach, or the men and women, because this is for men and women. There's in Josh's case, I love it. It was the woman who was the psych influenced Josh. And you can see where I'm going with this. Imagine the capacity that Marcus now, let's say he still maybe had some issues with his mental health, but people have encouraged him to see someone, or as Josh said, to be vulnerable and speak to people. He didn't drop out of school, so he stayed engaged. And on his journey, his peers that he was hanging out with, maybe a lot of them have been nudged, or maybe that they're talking and doing different things. So you can keep following the trajectory of the boy into the man, and eventually his family, he has a family, and there's no violence in his family because he's learnt that you don't do violence in your relationships. And imagine this one kid then has 4 kids. Can you see where we're going here, the potential that we have? So thank you. On our next slide, here's where we're thinking. So he's got the freedom to choose how he can be his best self, the skills to regulate his emotions, encouragement to seek help when they need it, permission to be vulnerable. So you just heard Josh. I love that he linked that in. And there's some positive guidance and advice from numerous influences. And then if that was the case, I think we would all understand this, that we would have a healthier and happier boy and into a man, and leading to healthier and happier and safer communities. So that's kind of, we wanted to top and tail it to kind of give you the sense that's what we're trying to do. I want to share with you that Marcus is based on a real kid that I met. And I taught him in community education. And within 12 months of putting good people around him, he went from a quite a depressed young man into someone who had been supported into a training centre, who started to experience success. He talked differently, he walked differently as a result of the impact of people around him. It taught me that at any stage, we all have the human capacity to grow and develop is always there. But when I met him at 16 and the work we did with him over 2 years of time, I just thought, oh my God, imagine we had met him earlier. And I think that's trying to sum up. Imagine that rather than wait until kids get to this point in time, what if we all, and as a whole community, we made a difference in young people's lives, that we don't have to fix them at the other end. So thank you for listening tonight, and that's the content and the pitch to what we're doing in the community. And now we would like to I'll pause now and allow some questions to come through, and I think AJ is going to facilitate that for us.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Elise, and thanks, Josh. That was incredible. I was actually quite moved by some of the messages and stories that you shared, Josh. I'm a father of 3 young kids, and I think we all have a part in this, and we all need to be encouraging our children to I guess be challenged as well in their thoughts, and that comes from us. So I really do appreciate you sharing your story and showing a level of vulnerability as well. I really appreciate that. So are opening up the Q&A. We have had quite a few questions come through already, which is awesome, and a couple of statements and comments. So some of that was a real great acknowledgement of you, Despy, and your introduction and welcome. There's been some questions just around more of a concern or the impacts of mental health that are derived through this. So Paul and Elise, if you just sort of want to elaborate a bit more on that. I think some people are a little bit alarmed that there is a strong link between the mental health impacts and, you know, conforming to these masculine stereotypes. So if you're able to sort of, I guess, talk to that a little bit more.
Elise, do you want to throw in first and then I'll go after you?
Yeah, I thought I'd just mention that since we've done the man box research, we've done some further research called Unpacking the Man Box, and the report can be found on our website, jss.org.au, and then you go to the Men's Project to find the information. That report found that men's adherence to their outdated attitudes to gender is, and just touching on the mental health side of things, was 10 times more accurate than demographics at predicting negative feelings and emotions. So there is a link, but I understand that there's lots and lots of different, you know, Paul and I and our program understand that there's so many aspects of life and well-being that can impact on mental health, and that this is perhaps part of it.
Yeah, great, Elise. I was going to mention exactly the same thing. And also to say, you know, when you look at when Elise went through and said what the man box pillars were, and you can see things like stoicism and not being able to show your emotions because you think that's weak, and so therefore you can't do it. And we heard from Josh alluding to similar things as well. To be vulnerable is not to be in a man box, like it's the antithesis of. So it makes, when you analyze it like that, it makes sense that it's not good for your mental health. I would encourage anyone who's also interested. A lot of our work kind of aligns with an initiative from the US. It's called The Mask You Live In. It's on Netflix. If you want to do a deeper dive, go in there, and we are doing similar things that they've done. And this boy that they get, he quotes, he goes, you know, you got your emotions and they just get all stuffed up inside and they can't get out. And he expressed it so well. And when we're carrying that with us and we're carrying that load, that's like I always use the analogy, you know, like if it was physical health, that's like Josh doing his knee. You know, it's like me hurting my elbow, and everyone go, "Oh, you're mad if you don't get that elbow fixed or the knee fixed." But when it comes to mental health, it's not like we don't have this same attitude. We're getting better, but you know, we should be treating it exactly the same way. Oh, it sounds like you've got something similar to a sore elbow. I think I'd encourage you to go and have a chat to the GP, and maybe they might encourage you to see someone. And then when they come back and oh yeah, I'm going to see someone. Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. You know, let's get rid of the stigma around mental health. You know, I put my hand up. The biggest issue I had with my mental health was the stigma. Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you for responding to that. Elise, this might be a question directed to you. It was around the survey that was conducted that you spoke to the data. What was the socioeconomic and cultural background of those men and boys that participated in that survey?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know the exact numbers off my head, but it was sort of across the board, where we don't know. I don't know the exact number of people of cultural background that took part of the survey, but there was a percentage. But we've recently done some further studies, particularly with African Australian men. And we did some focus groups with about 50 men from African Australian background, and we did find some similarities. That report's yet to be finalised and published, and the findings shared, but particularly around the self-sufficiency pillar and the breadwinner pillar, there was a lot of similarities. Yeah, so we tend to, we're also doing some work with the Islamic Council of Victoria, And I think, yeah, similar things around gender roles or rigid gender roles, and what it means to be a man. There's a lot of similarities in what we're finding.
And thanks, Elise. That was exactly right. One other thing, the group who made up the research, and so the Jesuit Social Services basically brought that research to Australia, a group called Promundo. They've done that same survey now on thousands and thousands of men and this is US, Mexico, I think now UK, Canada. And whilst there might be some small cultural differences and nuances, effectively the data just keeps coming up the same. And as Elise said, we've had the privilege of working with some imams recently, and the stories they share, it's no different from me growing up in mainstream Australia.
Yep. Thank you. We have another question here. It's just in relation to, was there any research done on how much pornography was from the participants related to how much they watch? The statement here is recent research on issues faced by upper primary and lower secondary girls uncovered overwhelming sexual harassment demands from boys who regularly use misogynist and violent porn, sometimes on school grounds. So yeah, just that correlation between the use of pornography and potential impacts.
Our work didn't go to that, but I encourage people to look up some work by a woman called Marie Crabb. I've been present and privileged to be around some of that research. And there's also a book I've read called Porn Inc., which all these things underpin that same point. And I also make mention that the school boy, school girl issues that started in Sydney, I read some of the vignettes from those women, and I could see that what I would call violent porn themes coming through in what they were describing. So again, as kind of Elise was saying, we don't sit here thinking we've got all the answers. We're certainly not. This is a really, really complex thing when you analyse how did this person come to be who they are right now. So I'd be speaking outside of my expertise, but I wouldn't be surprised if we had an expert like Marie Crabb here today, that she would probably be able to pull out some data to suggest that there's correlations.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And what we will do at the end of this presentation, or tomorrow, an email will go out to all participants, and there might be an opportunity for us to share some of that information, Paul, some of those links and references, so people can have more of a read. I guess to your point, though, just around maybe some practical things that people can do, and Josh spoke about some of his experiences with his own children, which was awesome. So we've got a question here. This person's keen to hear about what practical things a parent can do at home to break down the gender stereotypes. And I know our Mayor, Despy, has provided her comments, so she might want to share some of her experiences as a teacher and as a parent. But I'll open it to Paul and Elise first, and then Despy, feel free to jump in.
I think, Elise, you'd be great on this at the moment. We're about to do some work in some early childcare spaces, and I know Elise has been working on some materials for that. So I'm going to let Elise respond to this.
Thanks, Paul. I'm conscious of time, so just one thing that that I found useful is, and I can't remember the name of the lady. There's a TED talk on it, and it's about flipping what you would do, I guess, subconsciously or unconsciously with a boy or a girl, and sort of swap them, where, for example, if you'd ask your boy to lift something heavy, then also ask the girl, just as often. Or, for example, if you have a boy and a girl and you can do this, if the dolls and strollers are all in the girls' room, then and all the boy stuff is in the boys' room, and you sort of flip it. That's one of them. But I think otherwise, just being really aware of the messages that are quite stereotypical, and having conversations and raising critical thinkers.
Yeah, really
so that
good.
They can, choose.
Sorry, Elise, I didn't mean to cut across you.
Right.
I was about to say critical thinking, and like you can. you can actually make a bit of fun of it. You know, like you can watch TV and go, okay, how's this ad working? What are they telling us here? And sure as houses up comes the pink, you know, Lego set or something. I can't walk into a Kmart or something and it just jumps out in front of you once you see it. And I think just out for our kids to have awareness. And even yesterday, again, talking about learning all the time, I had a young girl who asked me, I was talking about stereotypes of male and female, and she said, I'm non-binary. This was grade 5 and 6. Can you give me any stereotypes, Paul, of related to non-binary? I went, oh my God, you know, I need to be learning more about this. And I said to her, I don't know any. I think that's a good thing. But, you know, these are the conversations we need to have.
Yeah, I'll just jump in too, AJ. A lot of stuff, you know, just the conversations that you have in the home around, you know, think about toy shops. Toy shops and department stores are probably the place where gender stereotypes will hit you in the face. And if you go to those places and talk about that with your kids, you know, really put it on the spotlight and allow them to choose whatever they want to. As a mum of a boy and a girl as well, we used to have the toys in an open space. So the toys weren't kept to their bedrooms. They were in a place where they were together. And so, you know, the trucks were next to the dolls, were next to the Lego, were next to the books. It was, everything's all in together. And it's that, you know, that creative place where anything goes, including dress ups. It doesn't matter. And putting those things in a place where, yeah, they're free to choose rather than into separate spaces really helps them make up their minds. Yeah.
And I just wanted to add to, I think this popped up somewhere in the questions, how Paul shared the story of Marcus and his disadvantage, but that this is happening even with the most privileged kids, because the messages are coming from all over the place, you know, media, and just peers, and it's sort of hard to avoid. So the path of a boy and the opportunity to influence is across the board. It's yeah, sorry, Paul, you might want to just touch quickly on that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that came up, and I probably should have made mention at the start. It was actually stereotypical what I did. We work in some of the most elite schools in Melbourne, and there's just as many kids in there who need the modelling and the shaping and the guiding as any other spectrum. It was just the path of the boy I was using was just one that I'd seen, and one that I'd seen where in an extreme event I saw a young boy who other people had probably given up on, just a bad kid, that with some influence he flourished, and that was why we took that theme. But absolutely, and also I'm really glad it was raised. Doing a lot of work in the family violence space, the assumption that it happens in suburbs, in some suburbs and not in others, is wrong. The data always shows that it cuts across every aspect of our community.
Thank you for those comments. Now, I am mindful of time, and we are creeping closer to the 8 o'clock time. We like to stick true to our time, but there is quite a few questions just around sport, and I guess that masculinity and the stereotypes that are within sporting culture. And, you know, the Mornington Peninsula, you know, sometimes people say sports at the heart of the peninsula, and lots of different sporting opportunities. So I don't know whether or not, Josh, you've got a perspective on this, but also open to yourself, Paul and Elise, just how we kind of change that culture. So the question, someone put a really fantastic, I guess, question and experience, but their final comment was, how do we improve these environments for our young people? Like, how do we challenge those stereotypes and make them to be a really safe and inclusive space? Because, you know, some of the behaviour that is present in these clubs just isn't that great.
I just quickly, because I know it's short on time, but I spent 5 years working with the Victorian Women's Trust on a program called Club Respect. It's online now. Your club can access all of it, and we built that piece of work specifically with that in mind. And just quickly, I've also spoken to some elite, sporting individuals in men's clubs who said the best thing that ever happened, this is the Western Bulldogs, the best thing that ever happened to their club was when they demasculinized their club and brought women into the organisation. So right from the top, I don't know if Josh has got any comments on that.
I think from my perspective, and it probably relates, Paul, to your first question earlier in the night regarding that on the field to off the field. And I think it's just being really aware as a coach, as a senior player, as support staff, whoever it may be in that environment, of the expectation of the values that you want to set, but also understanding the difference between, okay, you want to be courageous on the field, you want to be hard and tough on the field and all these things. That's okay, because you need to be. And that has a certain look about it on the field. But what does, talk about what courageous off the field, calling something out in front of your friends, or standing up for someone that you don't know that well because it's wrong. That's courageous. That's the same value, but it's in a different environment, and just understanding how and what, strong and tough, what does that look like? It might be just, obviously on the field, it's got a certain, it's clear what that looks like, but off the field, it's standing up to someone that's doing the wrong thing. It's calling bad behavior out. It might be, as a coach, just, understanding the key influences within the team and giving them more responsibility. One thing I know, if I talk about the Swans before my time, the biggest thing about the cultural change when Paul Roos took over was about empowering the playing group. And so it wasn't the fact that the coach was, in the old school ways, it was like, this is what I say, this is how it is, this is what it is. It was the players that were creating the environment that they wanted to be involved with. And they effectively the playing group and the leadership group ran the club. And so if you can share that responsibility and being open and coming back to the original point about talking and having safe environments to be able to talk about any issues or concerns, I think's really positive as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Josh, for sharing your thoughts around that. And equally, thank you so much, Paul and Elise, for running us through this session. It's been really informative, really valuable. I think we all need to continue to engage in these types of conversations, to have these courageous conversations. So I really do appreciate your contribution tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge and say thanks to our Mayor Despy O'Connor for being with us, and also our other councillors that are online tonight. I really want to thank those that have joined us, the participants, freeing up your evening to listen in and hopefully take away some messages that you can apply to your own families and your own lives. As we said, this is a collective effort. It'll take everyone has a role in this. So I really acknowledge and appreciate your contribution tonight. As Paul said, the next part of this is the modelling respect and equality training, or MORE as it's often referred to. And details will be on our website shortly with the expression of interest form. So we really encourage you to apply. There'll be also additional workshops that will take place across the peninsula later on this year. So keep your eyes peeled for that one on our website. Importantly, as we saw on the screen before, there might be things that have been triggering tonight for you. So at any time, if you feel you need to reach out, there are those important numbers that were up on the screen before, Lifeline and Respect. So make sure that you reach out to those organisations if you feel you need to have a chat. Finally, what we are going to do is, at the start, we put up a bit of a poll, and that'll come up on the screen shortly. We'll ask you to participate that in again, just to for us to get a bit of an understanding as to the learning that has arisen through tonight. So if I can ask you just to complete that again, it should take no more than 20 to 30 seconds before we sort of conclude tonight. So I think 20 seconds is up. But again, I really want to acknowledge everyone's participation. I want to also acknowledge the team behind the scenes that got everything in place for tonight and navigated through the technical difficulties at the start. It's been a fantastic presentation. I'm sure it's the first of many, and there'll be more to come. But yeah, make sure you look after yourself. Continue to engage in these conversations. Have the courage to speak up. And thank you so much for your participation. Enjoy what's left of the night, and we'll hopefully hear from you soon. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Mumby, I might just get you to stop recording now if that's okay, and